I feel like the swampy area is probably a better bet anyways than, getting too high in elevation, especially in the Adirondack high peaks, because in particular, as we all know, that's pretty much all dry evergreens the higher up you get, so not much in terms of food the higher up the mountains you're getting. But have you ever found bucks higher up in elevation here in the ADK, or have you found pretty much consistently your lower elevation tactics tend to work the best?
No, I mean, well, it all goes back to what I just said. Like, it's what I prefer. I mean, I have hunted high country, and I've killed deer in high country. Like they roam around up there. I mean, I'm not saying they don't. It's just I look at my odds, and I'm like, why do I want to go on a steep face, or why do I want to hunt a bunch of benches when if I kick something off there, it's probably gone for the day? I mean, that's a good tactic if you're with a lot of people where you can kind of still hunt towards each other or drive and watch,
Mm-hmm.
which is a big tradition in the Adirondacks. But if you're hunting on your own, then I just think it's a little bit better to be in that rolling hills and swampy stuff, so the deer can just run a little ways and stop. And most deer will they'll run out in front of you and they'll circle back to wind you. If the wind is going in that direction, they'll kind of cut back on you to wind you. And it just you can actually turn around, walk the other direction. You might catch them where they just ran away, like coming back towards you.
Sure.
If you kick them off a bench on one of those high mountains, you're probably not going to catch them. They're probably going to go straight down the mountain, or they're going to go back over on another bench that you might not even be able to get to from where you're at.
Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of, calling in bucks, here in the Adirondacks, as we mentioned, there's the deer have so many places to go. There's so many places to hide. I believe the statistic is there's one deer for every 2 square miles in the ADK. And so do you find that having to call the deer in is your best bet wherever you're hunting?
No, I grew up, I was taught to sit down and be quiet. So I kind of like to sit and be quiet, but I mean, at the same time, I have called deer in. I've used what they call a bleat can. You roll it over,
sure.
and it kind of makes like, a bleat noise. And I've had pretty good success with them, and had a little bit of success with a grunt call here and there, but they aren't things that I don't think I would rely on them. And I just like to sit there and be quiet. I like to be part of the forest and not have anything really know I'm there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's all part of it. That's all part of being in the woods, and again in a place like this, when you're more likely to not see deer than to see deer. It's nice to see nature for what it is all around you in those scenarios. So now that we've talked a lot about the nuances of Adirondack hunting in particular, let's talk about your books a little bit. So currently 2 of them are, I guess, sold out at this point. A Lifetime of Big Woods Hunting Memories and Backcountry Bucks. What can readers expect when they read those books?
Well, if they read those, pretty much both books are a narrative, and which it means I basically tell a bunch of stories, and I focused on some of the bigger deer that my father and I have killed. And I just kind of went through the events that transpired during the hunt to kill them. Like some of them we hunted for multiple years before catching up to them. So there are a bunch of little stories wrapped into the big story. And then I tell like the lessons I learned along the way. Like, I mean, my first book starts when I was a kid, and I kind of talk about lessons I've learned along the way, and things that have helped me as I've gotten older that I realize, I shouldn't have done that, or I should have done this. And, and then I just I've had a lot of my friends bought the books when they originally came out because they just wanted to support me. They had no interest in hunting or, reading about hunting. But then some of them actually read it, and they told me they couldn't believe how hunting is more of a journey in the adventures that are filled, into that journey, more so than just going out to, to try to find an animal to kill or whatever.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that being the case because, a lot of times people they don't quite fathom exactly all the work that goes into it and all the, as I said, all the nuances that go into finding any sort of animal that you're hunting. It's not just, I guess on some occasions, sure, it's you walk outside and there it is, boom. But for the most part, and especially around here, there's so much work. It's a chess game that goes into it, and I think when people start to see that, laid out in your your book in these stories, I'm sure it's very evident that that's the case. Very cool.
Yeah, it really what I tried to do is just show people, my journey through life, through being in the woods and in hunting, because a lot of people just simply don't understand hunting. And I tell people all the time, how many people do you know that are involved in a family, whether it's father and son, mother and daughter, mother and son, grandparent and grandson or uncle and aunt or whatever. Very rarely do you see any family problems with those type of people who are brought up that way. Usually it's a really tighter bond than what you see in many other instances.
Very interesting. I've never thought about that, but I could see how that would be the case. Is that similar how it is in your family unit there?
Yeah, I was brought up by my father in the woods, and I'm not saying that the people that hunt don't get in trouble, but I just look at all the people that I know, and there's usually a pretty solid bond between either brothers or father and son or uncles or grandparents. And then the bond also, it goes beyond that. And usually if you're brought up in the woods and you're taught how to hunt and respect nature and respect the laws, very rarely do you see any of those people end up in trouble with the law.
Mm-hmm.
And being outside all the time, I just think it keeps people out of trouble.
Yeah, sure. And there's always, people always talk about the bond that you create with the people you're hunting with, the people you're out there, going to battle with, quote unquote. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that, what do you think that is special about that bond? Like, how would you describe that specific bond and what you're talking about with, family units who do the same thing? How would you describe what that is or why that is to someone who's never been out hunting?
I would say probably because you learn the value of life and death with your family or closest friends. And through your life, you're going to see life and death amongst your family and friends. And when you learn about it as a child, it kind of carries with you, and you have a much deeper appreciation for a life taken or a life lost. And I almost think it makes you become more aware of your surroundings, more aware of your world, more aware of your life and how quickly everything can change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could definitely see that being the reason. And you would pretty much, it's like when you're out there with each other too, I feel like, it's like with take sports teams, for example. Success is great, but it's when you struggle that you become, the tighter knit group. And I think hunting, there's so much struggle involved, physical, mental, everything. It is a struggle. So when you're out there with other people going through the same struggles, I do feel like that kind of brings a different way of bonding in a different form that you just won't really get in other parts of life. And it's beautiful. It really is. So, Todd, since this podcast tends to be, a bit of a storytelling podcast, usually revolving around hiking different mountains and here in the high peaks and all around the park, and you being a storyteller yourself, are there any Adirondack hunting stories, whether in your book or not, that you find that come to your brain that really showcases, what it's like hunting here? Any good stories that come to mind when I ask you that question?
Oh, that puts me on the spot. That's like being
Sure.
in a job interview and you can't answer the question.
Oh, smart guy like yourself. I'm sure you'll get the job.
Oh, I don't know what story comes to mind. I have a lot of them, but I probably better not tell a few of them.
Okay.
Yeah, let me think about that for a minute. I can tell a pretty good story. Yeah. I was hunting with my father, and a couple of friends. And we were just outside the High Peaks area, and it was late, it was late season. It was late November. And any smart people probably wouldn't be on any body of water when the ice had started to freeze, when the water had started to, freeze into ice and become, start going out from the shore or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we got stuck in our camp, and we killed 2 really big deer one morning, and we had to get out because the water was freezing faster than we could really handle. So we had to leave the tent up. We had a 10 by 12 wall tent, canvas wall tent, and we had to leave it up, and we knew we had to get out that night, because if we didn't get out, we were going to be frozen in. There was no getting out then, because we had to walk for miles upon miles in hopes of getting out. And being a type 1 diabetic, I'm not sure I even had the necessary things I would have needed then, because we always relied on the boats. So we decided to head out. So we got out a ways the first night, out to a little bit better area than where we had started. And then as we continued the next day, the ice had frozen farther out. So now there's really only water it's kind of spotty out in the middle, and we knew we had to get back to shore. And then the wind picked up, and I was in a Radisson canoe, which is not built for big water. And my buddy Smitty was paddling, and I was guiding him, because he wasn't paddling, he was rowing it, because Radissons can be rowed. And I had never been so scared in my life, because I knew if we went in the water, even with life jackets, we were dead. There was no if, and, or but. And we had a little bit of water coming in, and I didn't know how we were going to get over the ice to get back onto the shore. Because what we were doing is we were trying to get the boats somewhere near close to where we could pack them out to the road. Because there's no way we could get back to the road where we had launched from. So I remember finally we got back, we hit like this beach-like area, and I'd never hugged my buddy Smitty so hard in my life. And somehow we got back to the road, and looking back on it, that weekend, a father and son lost their lives on Long Lake because they capsized a boat. And we're just so lucky that we weren't one of those people. And I realized right then that being on water isn't worth any deer you could ever even hope to take. And that was the end of my water escapades in November.
Yeah, that is scary. That I couldn't even imagine being in that scenario where the ice is freezing. You got to get out right now. Yeah, that's some terrifying stuff, and that's goes to show. And I say it a lot on the podcast, the Adirondack Mountains, they do not care about us. They do not care about our feelings. They must be respected. And you clearly learned a lesson that seems to have stuck with you from that day out there. And thank God everything turned out okay. And you can tell this story and maybe have a little laugh about it now. But I'm sure in the moment that was probably a terrifying scenario.
Yeah, it's funny. It actually gives me chills right now, as I just told you.
Sure. Yeah. Now, so you got back, you got the deer out, both of them. Were they at least deer that you have on your wall now, and you could remember that story when you look at them?
Oh yeah, they're on our wall. One was my father's and one was mine, and yeah, they're both on the wall. Another thing too, I have a lot of deer mounted, and people always ask me, well, why do you mount deer? Because a lot of people who aren't familiar with hunting think it's somewhat morbid. But I said, I have so many memories there. And, I have deer with people that I no longer hunt with, or they might've passed away. And I can look at it, and just looking at the deer, the memory comes back instantly. And, like some people have pictures on their walls and stuff. And very rarely do you see a picture where somebody isn't smiling, because pictures are taken in good times. And all of these deer that I kind of sit and I admire, it's not because I think I'm a great, hunter or anything like that. It's just because they're my fondest memories, and I want them closest to me as I can possibly have them.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's a tangible way to kind of bottle up those memories. Each deer